Well, hello again and welcome to Sebring. Appropriately, I'm covering Super Sebring and I've got a Super Sebring video for you today. Not only are we going to be talking about the Mobil 1 12 Hours of Sebring, which will be taking place tomorrow starting at 10 a.m., but I'll also be reviewing the FIA World Endurance Championship opening round here at Sebring. The race they call the Sebring 1,000 miles. But it is yet to go 1,000 miles. It did, however, actually make it to the 8-hour mark this year without any thunderstorms or COVID interrupting it, which is a first for the event. The winning car actually took the checkered flag, which is different than we have expected here at Sebring for the World Endurance Championship. We're also going to be doing a bit of previewing and cleanup on some things that happened with IMSA at Daytona, as well as showing off GTD with the help of a special friend of mine. So, without any further ado, let's take a look at the results from today's 1,000 miles of Sebring for the FIA World Endurance Championship. And if you hadn't paid any attention to all the goings-on in the off-season, you would be not very surprised that it's a Toyota Gazoo Racing 1-2. The number 7 car of Mike Conway, Kamui Kobayashi, and Jose Maria Lopez winning over the number 8 car of Sebastian Buemi, Brendan Hartley, and Ryo Hirakawa. I hope I said that right. But if you were paying attention, you would know that this was the debut of several new prototype teams for 2023, and the most hyped is Ferrari AF Course. The number 50 car, which qualified on the pole, took the 3rd podium position. And they kind of screwed up the strategy. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but I think Ferrari could have had a better day today than they actually did. 4th place, Chip Ganassi Racing with their Cadillac Racing number 2, the only Cadillac in the field and running full-time in the WEC this year. Earl Bamber, Alex Lynn, and Richard Westbrook on the driving duties for that. The Penske's bringing up 5th and 6th overall. The Porsches have been, I'll have to just say it, mid in their first 2 outings at Daytona and now in the 1,000 miles of Sebring. We'll have to see how they perform in the 12-hour tomorrow, but they haven't exactly shown race-winning pace yet. 7th place overall and first in LMP2 is the number 48 Hertz team Jota. This team will eventually be running a Porsche prototype in the Hypercar class and will even bring it over to IMSA at select events. But for today, they're an LMP2 team taking 7th overall. United Autosports and Prema Racing round out the top 3 in the LMP2 division. Inter-Europol competition nearly got a podium, but they did not. Team WRT, and yes, I've been corrected quite a few times, they will be a BMW team in Hypercar next year, behind or ahead of Jota, which of course we know will be a Porsche team. Then we've got another WRT car, the 31. Prema Racing, the number 9 in 13th spot, or 14th spot, sorry. Then in 15th we go to the 51 Ferrari. That car was crashed at one point. It collided with, ironically, a Ferrari GT car and then collided with another Porsche. The Alpine Elf team in 16th. LMP2 car will be a Hypercar next year. And then we get to 17th, Corvette Racing, winning GTE AM. There is no pro division, so why don't we just call it GTE? I have no idea. But a big note about Corvette is the fact that Corvette Racing wins the final, the last one, the last GTE race on United States soil. And it's a U.S. podium in some ways because Patrick Dempsey is the part team owner of the number 77 along with Proton Racing. Kessel Racing, the Ferrari 57 in 3rd, rounding out the podium in GTE. The AF Course Ferraris 21 and 54 in 20th and 21st respectively. The 54 was the one that had contact with the 51 AF Course prototype. Iron Lynx, which was so good early on in the race with the Iron Dames car, that of course the 60 car being the yellow one. Gulf Racing, which isn't Gulf Racing anymore, it's GR Racing, a Porsche, ahead of the pink Iron Dames Iron Lynx car. that was so strong early on in the race, actually had the pole position, but they ripped the spoiler or the splitter off the rear end of the car, and that took them out, or the diffuser rather. Number 10, Vector Sport. That's another car that may end up being a hypercar before next year. We've got another that's a Aston Martin in 26th, another Aston Martin in 27th, the 777 car, and another Aston Martin, Northwest AMR in 28th position, Project 1 in 29th. The Van Wall team, in 30th position, number 4, Hypercar. I was impressed with them today. They didn't have the results. Jacques Villeneuve had a mechanical failure and spun out of turn 17. That kind of put them back. But at some point, they were running in the top 5, which was super impressive. 31st place, disappointing, doesn't even begin to describe it for Peugeot. They had just had a terrible race. In fact, the 94 car was not even classified. Neither was the Alpine Elf team LMP2 car. The 23 United Autosports car, which had been dominating LMP2, actually had a camera blow up, the onboard TV camera blow up their electronics on the car. They had to retire. The Glickenhaus, which had such a good run here last year, retirement as well. And the 83 AF Corsa car flipped over in turn 1. Dramatic accident, and every time I've been here, there has been a flip at Sebring. We're perfect so far. So I've got some musings on the World Endurance Championship before we move on to previewing the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship race here next. Sebring has traditionally been a barometer for what to expect of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So I think a lot of people, especially in the industry, were looking at this event and saying, how are the LMDH cars going to match up against the LMH cars? How is the balance of performance going to be? Can anyone beat Toyota? Ryan Marine brought up a very good point, and it's something that I want to really address in this video. Because a lot of people are already starting the narrative complaining about Toyota and their pace that they're showing, obviously winning this race by 2 laps. But I would say that they have a lap on the field for every lap around the sun they've had developing that car. That Toyota has been in development for so long. Toyota was the early adopter to this hypercar formula. I don't think it's really a shock that they are ahead in the first race where they have real competition. And I think to Ryan's point, Ryan Marine over on Twitter, voice of SRO, you've probably heard of him before, but I think the big point about Toyota is the last time there was real competition, 2017, they were the scrappy underdogs. And a lot of people kind of doubted if Toyota would be able to kind of show against factory competition that they were legit. Well, you can't get any more legit than Ferrari, though I think it's really important to note that the Ferrari team is not like Scuderia Ferrari. They are AF Corsa, which makes sense because AF Corsa has been the Ferrari GT team, really the Ferrari arm of sports cars as long as I can remember. It would make sense that the Formula One team would not be running the sports car. But it has to be said that not only did Toyota prove today that they are absolutely the team to beat, and why did we ever doubt them in the first place? But the second thing is that I learned about Ferrari this year is that it looks like their sports car team is going to take after their Formula One team, unfortunately, at least in terms of strategy, because I think on pace, the Ferrari was damn close to the Toyota. But when you're pitting on lap 5, I did not get that strategy. They were leading the race. They pitted the cars. They mired themselves back in traffic. They had some procedural issues that put them back even further. They didn't, and it makes sense, right? It's the first race with that team, probably a lot of new guys on it. But the fact that they screwed up in the pits, got their team penalties, that was really what cost Ferrari a chance at victory, a chance of even challenging Toyota today. I think what I'm most impressed by was the performance of Cadillac Racing under the guidance of Chip Ganassi Racing. Now, they weren't on the pace that I thought they would be. I thought they would be a little bit more on Toyota's heels. Now, obviously, the Cadillac is a new car. It's had 24 hours on it, but it's only been up against, to this point, LMDH competition. And that being said, Cadillac has won an awful lot here at Sebring, and I thought they would be close to Toyota. Weren't necessarily, they got 4th overall, but they were the first LMDH car across the line. Speaking of LMDH, Porsche, what the heck is going on? Because So we're told, and I heard the guys from the ACO and the FIA in the press briefing that they had a couple of days ago say very specifically, we're not touching the BOP until after the 24 hours of Le Mans. So what then is Porsche doing? Because if they're sandbagging for BOP, it ain't happening, and there's really no benefit to sandbagging. So I would have to think that their pace is, what they've shown at Daytona and Sebring is actually their pace, which says to me, how are they going to be competitive when they get to France in June? I don't think they will be, to be quite honest with you. Now, one thing that will be in Toyota's advantage eventually is the fact that they are one of the early adopters of customer cars. What does customer cars mean? It means more data, it means more testing miles, it means more race miles. So let's say an Evo 2 version of this Porsche LMDH will be, will have much more data to be harvested. But I'm curious if there's more pace to be found in whatever Evo 1 version, I guess we'll call this, of the Porsche. And of course, Roger Penske's dream is to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And I would be curious to see if it happens this year. I think dollars to donuts, you're going to see an LMH car, not an LMDH win at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And much like here, I think you'll also see a Ferrari on pole at Le Mans. Just a suspicion there. LMP2, pretty much I've realized that the entirety of LMP2 is going to Hypercar next year. So it would say to me that LMP2 probably not going to be a class in the World Endurance Championship next year. That's not a surprise to anybody, I don't think. That's been talked about quite a bit. And then finally, GTE, I guess we'll call it. I mean, the FIA would like us to call it GTE AM, but when there is only one GT class, I don't really see why we need to put an AM behind the GT division. Corvette winning. The venerable class, the class that started as GT2, as I remember it. In fact, one of the greatest Sebring moments ever happened there in the GT class between Risi Ferrari and the Flying Lizard Porsche. And it's appropriate because GT1 was kind of sent out by Corvette. It looks like GTE is going to be much the same. The Corvette racing team winning here in Sebring, the last GTE race on U.S. soil in a class that really in some ways propped up U.S. sports car racing from a factory perspective in some lean years. So, hey, there's also an IMSA race tomorrow, and the big story going into this weekend, everyone is talking about it, and I haven't talked about it yet, and that is the massive, massive penalty that was inflicted on Meyer-Shank Racing after winning the Rolex 24 at Daytona. But later on, after the fact, they were found by IMSA to have manipulated tire data. There is a minimum pressure that you are compelled to run in IMSA, and if you do not run it, you will get a penalty. Even worse, if you attempt to conceal that data, the hammer will come down. They didn't lose the win, but they lost a whole lot. Due to their infraction, Meyer-Shank lost 200 team and driver points in the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. They lost all of their team and driver Michelin Endurance Championship points. They lost any prize money they earned from the 24 Hours of Daytona win, and additionally had to pay a $50,000 fine. Team and entrant representative Meyer-Shank has been placed on probation through June 30th of 2023. And the indefinite suspension and revocation of the IMSA annual credential for the team's engineer has been issued as well. So I guess now would be a good time to give you guys a little bit of inside baseball. Because while I can't say absolutely everything I know about this situation, I can tell you this. The paddock knew about this pretty quick. I don't know how widespread it was, but it was widespread enough that Honda Performance Development had to go to IMSA and reveal this information and tell on themselves to a certain extent. I know I knew about this, and I thought this was pretty common knowledge. Maybe that's just me being way too, thinking I'm smaller in this space than I am. But when I hear about these sort of things on January 30th, I was kind of surprised it took this long to have a penalty issued, to be honest, because it seemed like a pretty cut and dry violation. Again, like I'm saying, a lot of people in the paddock knew about this, were talking about this. It stayed quiet, but I don't think it was going to stay quiet for very much longer. I certainly wasn't going to break that. A cheating story, you need to have absolute, 100% concrete evidence that that's true. And I was not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole until it actually came out. It's come out now, and, it's unfortunate. I mean, I don't blame a team for going for a competitive advantage, right? Like, I think some people are really judging Meyer-Shank Racing quite harshly for this. I'm going to be a little bit nicer and say, look, you're going to push limits in racing. Sometimes you get caught. At the end of the day, they still got the watch on their wrists. So, I mean, was it really that bad at the end of the day? I don't know. We'll see as things go on. I think Wayne Taylor Racing is the first legal car across the line, has a chip on their shoulder, massive chip on their shoulder. And I would not be surprised to see them on a bit of a revenge tour tomorrow. But that's enough talking about prototypes for now. Before we take a look at the starting grid, I want to roll a bit of a feature I shot with a friend of mine, Alex Riberas, who is a fan of the channel, believe it or not, and a driver for the Heart of Racing Aston Martin team. You've heard a lot of prototype talk in this video because prototypes are very similar to open wheel formula cars, and that's my wheelhouse. But my wheelhouse isn't exactly GT racing. So with a GT 101 lesson, here is Alex Riberas.
Hello everyone, my name is Alex Riberas. I'm a driver for the 23 Aston Martin Vantage and the Heart of Racing. Welcome to GTD. So this is our little baby. It's actually not the race car that I drive, but it's pretty much identical because, as we will discuss further, there's two different classes in GTs. GTD Pro-Am, which has one amateur driver in the car and several professional drivers, while in the other class, which I am part of, it's professional drivers only, but the two cars are pretty much identical. We have the exact same equipment and the exact same resources to try and perform as good as we can. So I know that this is very different than what David's audience is used to see. Closed cockpit, not that many wings in front like in the car. It's a lot more similar to what you would see on a regular sports car, in this case an Aston Martin Vantage. So from the outside, the bodywork is based on the actual road car, but from the inside, as we can see on this other car, is slightly different than what you would see in a regular road car. To start, we don't have a seat for your passenger. Your passenger stays at home because we need a lot of electronics going on around here. There's a system to control pretty much everything that has to do with electronics that comes out of here from the power box. We have a cooling system, which is very limited, of course, because we don't want to lose any power, but we cannot have a regular AC like you have in your road car, which would be honestly so convenient because it gets hot in here. But we have to try to maximize what we have in terms of cooling from the external side and from the inside to keep the drivers at a temperature that we can perform as well. On the other side, we have all the radio equipment and all of the traction systems and ABS systems that play along in terms of drivers' ability to use those systems for your advantage to take the most out of the car. Here in a very particular place, we have the driver's bottle system, right? So when you do a driver change in the race, the mechanic that opens this door basically just takes out one of the bottles that presumably has been emptied by the driver and then puts a new cold one, which feels amazing when you get a brand new cold bottle and you just grab your drinking tube, you point it down and you press it. It's like heaven right there. So good. But yeah, a little bit different than what you guys are used to, but the racing, thanks to the cars being a lot more robust, not that many wings, not that many flaps that can be damaged, so the racing and the contact is a lot more frequent, and that gives us the opportunity to actually have really cool battles. So I expect the cars to be very well close together in terms of performance. We will see at the end of the 12-hour race tomorrow. It's going to be a tight competition between many cars. Even though the cars are very similar to one another in terms of performance, the base of the cars are very different. So that's probably the biggest difference between NASCAR, between IndyCar, between LMP cars, that you're gonna have a car like right here, the Aston Martin Vantage, with a front engine, all the weight is in the front of the car, versus we drive against Porsche, we drive against Lamborghini with the engine right under the back of the driver, where the way they achieve the lap time is completely different. But at the end of the day, the performance is almost identical. And that gives for very cool racing, very amazing battles that we are able to achieve with different cars. And at the end of the day, for the fans, it's a cool way to see a car that you can buy on a regular car dealership that is actually racing in some of the coolest races in the world. So this right here is what I would call my office, the driver's office. In my opinion, one of the best offices in the world, I have to say. You cannot take it for granted. This is a very special place, and even though it looks a little bit complex in terms of buttons and the central console over here, as David can probably show a little bit what we have, you can play a lot with the braking bias of the car. This is all like engine maps, traction control, and ABS is controlled over here with these few rotary buttons. But most of the time, the favorite button that we like to use is this one, F, that is flashing. That's when you want to distract the car in front of you, you flash. And then you let him know, hey buddy, I'm quicker, I'm coming, just to let you know. That's something that you cannot do in single seaters that we like to use in sports car racing. But on top of it, one of the few things that make sports car racing so different is that as a driver, you know, you have the same equipment as everybody else. You can have a Pro-Am car like this one with a gentleman driver who does this, you know, as a hobby. Their hobby is racing cars. And as a gentleman driver, you get to experience your main hobby, right? Your main passion. You get to experience it in the same equipment as the professionals, and you can actually race against them at the same track, in the same conditions, in the same time, at the same time. It's pretty crazy when you think about it, because if you are, you know, a businessman, you are a big fan of football. Let's say you're a fan of the Tampa Buccaneers in this case, and you're like, I love Tom Brady, and you know, sometimes in my free time I like to play some football. But you can never compare yourself to Tom Brady, right? You will never be able to compete against him in the same conditions, with the same ball, in the same stadium. That's not gonna happen. Here, you can literally buy a GT3 car, you can buy a Merc, you can buy a Porsche, you can buy a BMW, whatever is your favorite brand, or your wife's favorite brand. And then you go racing, you get better, you train, and you can actually enter this series where you are able to compare yourself with the professional drivers, the best drivers in the world with this sort of equipment. And that is something that makes GT racing extremely unique. That is something that you cannot achieve almost through any other sport. All right, so here it is, starting on third place tomorrow for the Sebring 12 hours. It's gonna be me starting in the race, then Ross Gunn, and then David Pittard, the two Brits. And we're gonna be sharing driver duties for the entire race. So cheer for us, number 23. And thank you very much for following along and supporting the Heart of Racing and Aston Martin.
So we did have qualifying today with the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship for the Mobil 1 12 Hours of Sebring. Let's take a look at the starting grid as they will roll to the start tomorrow. It's Pippo Durrani on the pole position, the Whelen Engineering Cadillac. Actually the fastest lap time overall turn of the weekend between WEC or IMSA, the GTP cars. Fastest between the two series. It's a front row lockout for Cadillac. Only two Cadillacs in this race today. Of course, the WEC Cadillac is over and done already. In the second row, it is the Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti Autosport Acura, and on the outside is the number 6 Porsche. Then we go to the Meyer-Shank Racing, number 60, mired in controversy alongside the second Porsche. Then we've got, alongside the BMW. Then we've got the second Porsche alongside of the second BMW. That completes the GTP class. On the pole in LMP2, it's the number 52 PR1 Mathiasen Motorsports, Orica, all Oricas, all Michelin tires, all Gibson engines. Then we've got the 35 TDS Racing, number 11 TDS Racing, CrowdStrike by APR, High Class Racing, Tower Motorsports, Rick Ware Racing with some names you're familiar with, Devlin DiFrancesco and Pietro Fittipaldi. Eric Lux qualified the car. Era Motorsports rounds out LMP2, and on the pole in LMP3 is Andretti Autosport. They'll start alongside of Ave Motorsports in LMP3. JDC Miller Motorsports is third. Their other car is a Porsche. They will be eventually a Porsche team in GTP. Then we've got the Riley Motorsports number 74, the number 30 from Junior 3 Racing. AWA in their Duquesne alongside of Performance Tech Motorsports, their Ligier, another AWA car, and then Sean Kriege Motorsports, which actually their car qualified slower than the pole-sitting GT Pro car of Corvette Racing, but because of IMSA's class-splitting rules, they will start ahead of the Corvette. Then we've got in second place the Vassar Sullivan GTD Pro car. Third place in GTD Pro is WeatherTech Racing. Fourth in GT, but actually first in GTD AM is the Wayne Taylor Racing Acura. And then we've got the 57 Windward Racing Mercedes. Then we've got the Heart of Racing car. This is the one that you've just seen featured. Alex Riberas was the qualifying driver. Then we've got Risi Competizione, always stalwart in these endurance races. Then we've got the AM Vassar Sullivan car. Then we've got the 16 Wright Motorsports Porsche. A lot of people upset with the Porsche performance at Daytona, but they seem to be on pace a little bit more now. Ferrari 023, and then the Paul Miller BMW, and then the Turner Motorsports BMW. Then we've got the 78 car. That's the Lamborghini, sponsored by Aero Electronics. Then we've got the Iron Lynx car, qualified by former IndyCar and Champ Car driver Frank Pereira. Then we've got Inception Racing, the only McLaren in the field. Another two Ferraris, 47 and 21. The 83 Iron Dames car has Sarah Bovey and Rahel Frey doing double duty from the WEC race. Heart of Racing team, that's the second car you saw today. They're in 44th spot. 45th is Kelly Moss with Riley. Then we've got the Magnus Racing Aston Martin. Wright Motorsports, that's a Porsche. AO Racing, another Porsche with a T-Rex livery, believe it or not. Gradient Racing, Kelly Moss with Riley. BAF, which had a big crash in qualifying, but they're just about done repairing the car. Then we've got the 32 Mercedes, and rounding out the field is the Turner Motorsports Pro car. So that is one hell of an informational video. For tomorrow, I can't count out Wayne Taylor Racing. I think they're going to win overall. I just have a feeling about it. But it's going to be so hard. I mean, this is Pippo Durrani's track, right? I mean, he's been so good here. I think it's going to be between the 10 and the 31 with the 01 car as the spoiler. I'm curious to see if Porsche has absolutely anything for the rest of the field. I think we're kind of, at this point, accepting that BMW is going to be behind the 8 ball for a little while in IMSA. GT, throw a coin, seems like always. I think probably I should be biased and pick the Heart of Racing car, but you think about last year in Corvette, they're on the pole, they won the WEC race. Obviously, it's a slightly different variation, but actually, technically, it's still the GTE car. They won here last year. I would think that they would be in good shape, but I would also look at the Pro Lamborghini. That was also a car in the hands of Mirko Bortolotti that almost stole this thing from Corvette last year. So we'll have to wait and see. So, Sebring, 12 hours. Tomorrow, I'll have a full video recap of it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.